Resident Evil Village is the 8th installment in the Resident Evil series from Capcom. This was one of my most anticipated games of the year. I am a huge fan of this franchise, and I was really excited to see what they would do with this new installment and how they would continue Ethan Winters' story. And I finished it about a week ago after 10 hours of gameplay, and I am really excited to talk about it, so let's get into it. This is a direct sequel to Resident Evil 7, and we once again follow Ethan Winters as he's now living back at home with his wife Mia. And they have a kid now, and all is well until Chris Redfield shows up and does some things that I don't want to get into here in case you haven't seen the trailers, because I don't want to spoil it for you. Which then leads to Ethan waking up in a village filled with werewolf zombies and vampire ladies and all kinds of strange Resident Evil creatures, and he has to escape in order to be reunited with his family. Resident Evil has slowly become one of my favorite game franchises. Ever since I played the remake of 2, which was actually my introduction to the series, I just fell in love with the world building of these games and the creepy, dark atmosphere, but also how they're able to pull off this zany, insane, like cheesy 90s vibe that you seem to find in all of the games. But after I played the remake of 2, I went on to play the remake of 3, as well as 7, and then the HD remaster of 1. So as of right now, I haven't played 4, 5, or 6, but I'm hoping to do that in the future. But I really liked what they did with 7 and how it felt like the series was going back to its survival horror roots. That is kind of what made me love Resident Evil in the first place. And also, I didn't know how I felt about the decision to change it from the traditional third-person view to the first-person view, but I actually ended up really liking it because I felt like it made the game a lot scarier than it otherwise could have been. And seeing as Village was a direct continuation of that story, I was really interested to see what they would do with Ethan Winters' story and the places that it would go with his character. I love this game. I definitely think it's a worthy addition to the franchise. It keeps a lot of the elements of 7 that I really enjoyed, while also leaning into the action side of these games a lot more than 7 did, which I think was good because it made things feel fresh and it didn't feel like they were just retreading the events of the last one. But hands down, the best thing about this game is the setting. This is such a cool location for a Resident Evil game. And there were times where I wouldn't even be doing the main objective just because I wanted to walk around in the world and explore everything. Everything feels so huge and grand, and you actually go to multiple different environments rather than just staying in the village for the whole time. For example, there's a castle that you spend a lot of time in towards the beginning that is so much fun to walk around. I felt like I was walking around like a haunted Disneyland. For me, one of the best things about Resident Evil games is the sense of exploration, where you just want to walk around in every room and get every item and explore every nook and cranny of the world. And I do highly recommend that you play this game like that because you will be rewarded in some really cool ways. But the location also has this great feeling of suspense where you'll be walking around in this wide open field and nobody's there, and it just gives you this creepy, unsettling vibe. Or you'll be in an abandoned house walking down a hallway and it's just really quiet and all you can hear are the floorboards creaking as you walk down. So in that way, the location really adds to the scares because it makes you feel like anything could jump out at you at any second. Also, if you are a fan of the horror genre like I am, there's some really interesting references and nods to old horror movies, and that was really cool to see. The whole Resident Evil series in general has always kind of been this homage to horror as a genre and old horror movies and stuff like that, so that was an element of this game that I was really glad that they included here. But one thing that this game does a little bit differently is in the inventory management. In 7, you had a limited number of slots that you could increase if you got like a pack or something, but for the most part, you kind of had to keep a lot of items in item boxes throughout the game. But here you get this big suitcase that gives you a lot more room, and you can definitely carry a lot more items. And you have the ability now to craft certain items on the go if you have the right resources. So if you're running low on ammo, you can just craft it, and then you don't have to worry about it. So in that way, I feel like this game takes away a little bit of the tension that you had with previous Resident Evil games. Kind of a classic thing with these is that you always feel like you never have enough bullets, and you're always scrounging around for resources or health kits or something like that. But here, they make it a little more easy, so some of that tension of always feeling like you never have enough stuff is alleviated. And that was one thing that I kind of missed with what they did in 7. It can be stressful at times, and there were definitely moments in the game where I had filled up all of my inventory slots and I had to get rid of some stuff, but they just didn't quite nail it. So I wish some of that tension was still carried over into this game. There's also a merchant that shows up in various points through the game, and you can buy things from him, like weapons and health stuff and upgrades. It felt different, but I did like his inclusion in the game. He's also a very weird character, and he's just this gross, like, old man that sells you stuff. So, I don't know, I thought he was cool. The story makes some pretty interesting decisions, especially with Ethan's character, because in 7, I thought he was just kind of fine and serviceable as the main character, but I didn't really feel any emotional attachment to him. But they actually really make you care about him, especially towards the 3rd act of this game. And I was surprised at just how compelling of a character he came to be. And what they did with Chris Redfield was pretty awesome. I will admit, I don't know a ton about that character, at least based on the ones in the series that I've played, but I do really like how he was used here, and he plays a much bigger role in the game than I thought he would. It's definitely clear from the first couple hours of this game that it leans into the action side of Resident Evil than the previous games have. You spend a lot of time wiping out hordes of enemies and gunning down these vampire zombie things. It definitely keeps the survival horror elements for sure, but this is definitely more of an action game than 7 was. It definitely feels like a departure, but for the most part, I really like the direction that they took with this game. A lot of those action set pieces are incredible. There's this one towards the beginning where you're running through this dungeon and these werewolf zombies are chasing after you and the ceiling's collapsing on you at the same time. Really exciting stuff. I thought that was a great sequence. And there's a lot of great boss fights, which does bring me to one of my biggest negatives with the game. Of course, we gotta talk about Lady Dimitrescu, the massive 9-foot-tall vampire lady that everybody was freaking out about. She's not in this game anywhere near as much as I'd like for her to be. When she's in the game, it's great, and there's some really tense sequences that come from her chasing after you, but she is in no way the main boss of the game, so that was kind of disappointing, especially with how Capcom kind of hyped her up. I feel like they kind of revealed her as some of the early parts of the game just to give people like a teaser, and then there was this massive reaction from the internet, and they were probably just like, oh shit, y'all aren't gonna be happy. I thought she was going to have this great presence like Mr. X does or Nemesis in 2 and 3, but her appearance in the game is so short-lived that she wasn't really able to do that. That being said, the game does have a really great variety of enemy types that keeps the action interesting, and there's this one encounter that I want to mention involving a abandoned, broken-down house where you're walking through the hallway and there's a baby creature of some kind. Ugh. Probably the scariest moment in the whole game. If you've played it, you definitely know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to spoil it for those of you who haven't. Overall, though, I loved Resident Evil Village. I thought it did some really interesting new things and was a nice departure for the series, but it also kept a lot of the elements of the previous games that I really enjoyed. I absolutely adore the setting and walking around in this gothic horror village and castle, and just everything they created here is so beautiful. The graphics are amazing. I really appreciated that even though the game wanted to lean more into the action aspects of Resident Evil, it still kept a lot of the scares that I've come to this series for. I really enjoyed the story and the places that it went with the characters, and I'm excited to see what's next. This is probably one of the best games in the series, and I'd actually say that I liked it more than 7. I'm going to give Resident Evil Village a 9 out of 10. If you are a fan of the series and you haven't played it yet, definitely go give it a try, because I do think it is worth your time. But if you haven't played any Resident Evil games before and you're wondering if you can just jump into this one, I would say definitely play 7 before you play this one, because it's a direct continuation of that story. But you don't need to play the other ones. But I do recommend that you do, because Resident Evil is a really awesome series. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this review. I really do appreciate it. And thanks for bearing with me as I waited a while to get this review out. Village came out the week that I had my final exams at school, so it just wasn't a good time for me to devote to playing a game, so it took me a little while. But now I'm actually done with this past school year, so you can look forward to a lot more videos coming. My goal for this summer is to at least get 1 video up a week, and I'm going to try to stick to that as much as possible. I'm definitely going to be reviewing A Quiet Place 2 pretty soon, and I might do a review of Invincible Season 1. I just watched that show, and I'm really excited to talk about it, so I might get a video up on here sometime soon. So you can look forward to those, and as always, be sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.